Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Joining us on the show tonight, we have Datuk Seri Dr. Zaini Ujang. He is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water, or better known as KASA, Kementerian Alam Sekitar dan Air. And tonight we're going to be looking at the past year in terms of Malaysia's progress or lack thereof in terms of the environmental sector, and we're also going to be looking at what to expect in the year ahead. Dr. Zaini, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me today.
Right, so we ushered in 2021 with disruptive floods and landslides. Every year, more and more Malaysians are displaced by these floods, and it turns out that we know that monsoon season is an annual affair, but in recent years, rains have been heavier, storms have been stronger. The cost of these disasters have, it's both monetary cost and also of human lives. What does the Ministry of Environment and Water have in terms of a long-term flood mitigation plan for the nation? Or is the plan simply to deal with each disaster as it comes?
Thank you for that question. Due to the recent phenomena, especially these few days, we can conclude the flooding seasons for this, it's not this year, since last year, right. Mainly due to two major factors. One, the climate conditions. Then the second one is anthropogenic, that causes by human being. This is also important. We can see that a lot of irrigation, drainage systems are in place at the moment, but it's not able to cope with the amount of rainwater that we receive recently. That's number one. Number two, we also must look into the holistic perspective. From planetary perspective, and we think that this is due to climate change that occur not only in Malaysia but also in Sweden. Say for example, this winter is the warmest winter in Sweden, and last year was the warmest as well. So
I do want to ask you this, and I know there's a big picture issue, but many of us have to deal with the small picture, our neighborhoods, our routes to work, trying to get home or so. Crossing the peninsula. I wonder though, people look at this and think, is the government, your ministry and related ministries, are they working together to deal with these issues? Because it seems to me like, okay, whatever your remit is, it also impacts, say, the drainage department, which is,
property development even.
Property development. And so, you think that, there's always seems, do you think we're doing enough of a good job on that? Because I've seen and we all have anecdotes, I've seen in my own neighborhood, new roads with poor drainage. It's not even like old roads,
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very, I think, mouthful answers if I will to answer that. But I think what also important for us to understand is what we can do at local level. Say, for example, local governments are also responsible to ensure that enough houses are built to cater for people that need accommodation. But at the same time, we have to provide them with enough infrastructure. Okay, the question is in Malaysia, most of the infrastructures at the moment are by design developed by developers. And there are thousands of developers in one area. And to coordinate that, it is an issue as well. So it's not as easy as we say that, okay, you do your part, and then you have to follow this, because sometimes it's very difficult to map out what is to be done, that's number one, and whether that is sufficient enough to cope with the requirements and the environmental changes happening from time to time.
I think that's quite interesting that you laid it out, and I was thinking about whether there is a map. You said to map out, the coordination that's needed. Is there a map? Is there a map of which ministries need to work with each other, which state level agency needs to work with the federal level agency, so that we can actually have a nationwide plan?
Theoretically, we have Plan Malaysia that plan out all infrastructure work in the country. And after that, this task for you to maintain river is under Department of Irrigation and Drainage and Irrigation. And then we have also Department of Environment to look after the environmental quality. On top of that, the infrastructure, say for example, roads, to connect people from one place to another by transportation system. That is also to be connected, which is very difficult. I think for housing developers, real estate in particular, their job is just to create a physical structure, the connectivity, the ecosystem, the biosphere, the hydrosphere that need to be connected is sometimes beyond their boundary. No, they are only developing this area. So local authority in particular, or Plan Malaysia in particular, they will plan and map out everything. This is very important. I don't want to pinpoint who's responsible or not. So
well, I think a lot of Malaysians do, because we want to blame somebody for our troubles, right? I mean, and it's natural. Somebody needs to be held accountable for the troubles that Malaysians suffer as a consequence of poor planning or maybe poor monitoring of those plans, because things need to be tweaked. I want to ask you though, since you're with us, to help us understand how governance structures are evolving in Malaysia, because clearly with the ministry that you now are a part of, from the reports we have, it was an attempt to bring water resources and water service together under one ministry. Is that correct? And the reason was by splitting those two dimensions of work, we actually had a problem.
Yeah. Environment consists of four, this is not lecture, okay? Consists of four components. One is what we call biosphere, living entities, flora and fauna, human being. Second is hydrosphere, water, atmosphere and lithosphere. So talk about hydrosphere, generally it can be divided into two. One is what we call as raw water. This is specifically for Malaysia, because we have state and federal jurisdiction, so we divide them into two. One is what we call water resources. Water resources is under the jurisdiction of state. So we are talking about water in the river, water in the lake, underground and whatnot. The second one is water services. And water services starts when the raw water enters the pipe. The moment it enters the pipe, it is water services. Right. So water services consists of water supply, and then we have also sewerage and the rest. So when we have this ministry, this is the first time where water services and water resources is merged together and design. I think we can easily map out what is to be done and what is to be replaced.
Okay, all right. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about that federal state jurisdiction when it comes to environment regulation. We'll come back in just a couple of minutes and continue our conversation with Dr. Zaini Ujang. Stay tuned to consider this. Welcome back to Consider This with Sharaad and I. We're speaking to Datuk Sri Dr. Zaini Ujang, Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water, and we're going to continue our look at Malaysia's plan for the protection of the environment and sustainable management of resources. Let's come back to something you said a little bit earlier in the conversation about the federal and state jurisdiction, and I'm wondering whether there's a conundrum there, because there's clear portfolios of what the federal can look after and what the state can look after, but environmental issues don't follow administrative boundaries. How do you get over that?
Yeah, to be realistic, we have to have some rules between us. Yeah, so otherwise, it's very difficult for us to handle things. It's very, I think, very cumbersome, and at the same time, it's very challenging. What we have done in the past, say for example, is just to identify what is the responsible of the states. And this is needed because the state will be this heading initiatives towards that. Say, for example, I'll give you an example. When we start about modernizing our water sector, we have WASIA, Water Services Industry Act. And this is where the federal government help the states to manage water services. And this is very important. Water services, you are talking about 10 billion ringgit Malaysia per state investment that required. In Selangor and Kuala Lumpur, probably we need probably 20, 30 billion. So for just for state to handle it is too big. And we need a specific regulation. We have commission to undertake the exercise in order to enable us to get funding proper and whatnot. In fact, we have a specific investment arms that going to fund water asset projects. We call it Pembadanan Asset Air Berhad, and they have a facility of 45 billion to invest in water sector. So if you allow state to handle it themselves, and we have 14 of them, so they will be very difficult for us to connect each other. So by having federal government to involve, we will able to connect between one state and to another, neighboring states.
Okay, I want to ask you this. I mean, because well, in some sense, I guess we have two territories. I mean, Sabah and Sarawak are quite different, and they don't even connect with the states of the peninsula. But it's also not just federal-state relations; it's also relationships between states. And we see in the Ulu Muda and Kedah versus Penang issue, really this barrier to a genuine cooperation. Because without cooperation between Perlis, Penang, and Kedah, they have a real problem. How do you preserve the water catchment? How do you, so on and so forth?
They have some degree of understanding at the moment, okay? And we want to further negotiate the terms, and we have already indicated to the three states that we are going to do something special in the near future.
Right. Could you give us a sense of it? Because it seems that the positions are quite antagonistic at the moment. Yeah, with the MB of Kedah saying that he will throw villages into the dam and into the river.
Probably
and block it
that's
up.
the way to negotiate.
Okay, that's the Trumpian way. Okay.
Can I ask, what is the role of the ministry?
So the role of the ministry is to harmonize the requirement of the states.
So you're the peacemaker?
We are. They are not fighting. They are just negotiating.
Okay, honest broker negotiating. So the role of the ministry is to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, can I say this though? What I understand of that history is that federal government at one point had promised Kedah money to protect Ulu Muda, and they never delivered on that. And so the problem seems to be is not just whether federal can do its job of being an honest broker, but whether it can actually deliver on the promises that.
So we have to formulate the formula.
Which means
the formula.
So it's not. I'm not entitled to release some information, but I would say that we have to formulate the formula so that we can have some kind of understanding. State will be able to get some funding.
Okay. Well, one of the formulas that the ministry does formulate is the environmental law. And I want to talk a little bit about regulation and how to make laws on environmental issues. Last year, we saw a lot of water cuts, and that was caused by illegal dumping of chemicals in our rivers. That's led to calls for tighter enforcement. That's always been the case, right? They think the fines will deter polluters. The Environmental Quality Act of 1974, I believe that's the primary federal law that governs.
And then WASIA.
That governs our,
WASIA is 2006.
Oh, 2006, all right, to kind of curb the pollution and protecting the environment. Is this law,
Two laws, yeah.
Are these laws ripe for reform? Are we talking about, are these laws enough to protect Malaysia's environment?
Thank you for that question. We have already submitted to the cabinet for discussion on the improvement of the law, especially in relation to penalty and the scope. So, and we hope that by next sitting of Parliament, we'll be able to discuss this in Parliament.
Are we doing enough in terms of deploying the technologies that are available, like the constant monitoring of pollutants in waters and so on and so forth. I mean, do we have a system that is cutting edge? I mean, are there best practices we could be adopting that we're not?
We have about 30 online monitoring stations that monitored by Department of Environment. And then all water operators, they have their own. So assuming we have more than 100 water treatment plant, so we must have more than 100 plus 30, 130 in major rivers where we extract our raw water for water supply.
Is that adequate though?
Well, if you ask me, 1,000 is not adequate, 10,000 is not adequate. The question is where to get money to pay. Each costs us about 1 million a year.
Right. Can I just ask you now, just if we were to focus on the issue of water and protecting our water sources, which area requires reform most urgently?
Okay, this tricky question. The emphasis should be given to the water supply system. Yeah, so that's very important. You can see in places like Singapore, Japan, it's never heard that there is water interruption. Why? Because their water system has more treated water than what people require. Say, for example, you require 100%, and they have in place in the stock, in their reservoir, treated water of 120 or 130%. So at any point of time, in case one water intake is polluted, so you have additional water that available in the systems for, say, for example, for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, I want to ask you this. So you bring up the question of cost. Are we paying too little as consumers for a system that needs much more investment? Should we price our water higher? I know everybody wants everything cheap, but we also want it reliable and good. Can we have it both ways?
So you're asking whether we want to increase or not?
Yes, I think, you know, see, it's natural. So the more you increase
I just putting this, we are paying less than Indonesia and Thailand and Philippines per cubic water that we use at home.
We should be paying more.
Sure.
Is that cheap cost one of the reasons why we have this negligent attitude towards our water?
Probably,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, let's come back and continue this conversation with Dr. Zaini Ujang. Lots to cover about the environment, especially as we look ahead to 2021. Stay tuned to consider this. Thank you so much for staying with Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, with me Sharaad Kuttan, and tonight we're speaking to Datuk Seri Dr. Zaini Ujang, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water. Let's talk about the year ahead. 2021 now, we're a couple of days in. What is the government's policy and strategy about the environment going into 2021? I understand that you became KSU Secretary General in March of last year, right? So now you have the ministry. Now you have the full year. What is the plan?
Okay, thank you for that. We have international obligation that we have to commit, and then not only obligation in terms of reporting, but also in terms of reducing carbon emissions, say, for example. That's big. Today, the Minister of Environment and Water has released a press statement on BUR, Biennial Update Report to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this is very telling, and this is very important for everyone to understand. So I want to say this very clearly. The report is for 2016, because it is X-4. Reporting means after 4 years, you report now. You get all the information, and it shows that our carbon emission has increased by 33% from the previous report.
So in the past 4 years, our carbon emission has increased
For 33%,
33%.
So that's not good. It's supposed to be reducing, isn't it?
it's supposed to be reduced.
33% is a significantly high percentage.
And
No?
what is the cause of that?
About 80% due to energy related, due to, say, for example, power generation, transportation. So in order to move forward, this year we are going to spell out very clearly what is to be done, what is to be mitigated. Of course, we have carbon policy that we are going to develop this year very clearly. We had that in 2009, but it was not thorough enough, I would say. So we are going to revise, and this is our main focus this year. By March, quarter one this year, we are going to release our carbon policy. Then this is very important for us moving forward.
You know, so many of these issues are very technical for a layperson like myself and others. I think it's hard to understand some of these issues, but what gets categorized as either renewables or not? I remember a couple of years ago a dispute between the Pakatan Harapan government then and the state of Sarawak over where the big dams and big hydro was considered renewables. And is there thinking about that? I mean, are we accepting large hydro as
so
renewables?
The easiest way is to accept the definition by the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We have representative in that committee, and this is very important. Whatever definition we spell out for Malaysia, it must be also workable. Accepted by other countries, yeah. So that's fair and square. So what we are trying to do, mitigation, is we are going to increase the energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency. We are going to look into land use change in particular, because we are not good in LULUCF. Land use and land use change and forestry.
Okay.
So we are declining, if you can see that numbers that I've mentioned earlier.
Right.
So these are areas where we have to work very closely and we have to mitigate. And indirectly, when we talk about big picture, this is planetary level.
Right.
We are going to do it well at the smaller scale.
Well, on that note, sorry.
Just to answer the question about Sarawak, big dams in Sarawak,
Yeah.
are we going to, have we accepted, at least does Putrajaya accepted, that these constitute part of our renewables?
Renewable means that we don't use this new resources, say for example fossil fuel.
So big hydro in Sarawak,
It's
is it?
called hydro. It's not big or small.
It's just
considered
hydro.
just hydro.
And is it considered renewable?
That considered as no carbon emission generated from that activities.
Okay. Very quickly, coming back to the carbon policy that you said is going to be launched in the next couple of months. Government policy isn't the holy grail of all environmental reform. It's a good start, but it's also about winning over businesses, big businesses, corporates, getting them to come on board with these types of reforms. It's about winning the hearts and minds of consumers and users, embracing environmentally friendly habits. What is the ministry planning to do to get over those hurdles? I think corporates, the private sector, is going to be one of the biggest hurdles in trying to get carbon.
This is the beauty of MCO, and this is the beauty of. I'm so sorry, I'm not for it, but this is happening. Okay.
The unintended consequences, yes.
COVID-19, and there are people who are now rethinking about what we have done in the past. Therefore, in many places in the world, in Indonesia, in Thailand, I'm not talking about in Europe, I'm talking about our neighbors. They are restarting with what they call Green Deal, green recovery. I give you an example. Instead of using old fossil fuel buses in Jakarta, they are planning for 10,000 electric buses in Jakarta by 2030. So we have to be ambitious. We don't say that we do this and we lose money. What if we do it in Malaysia, producing green buses, say, for example, and we are the main manufacturer in this region because we have enough volumes and the manufacturers will come to Malaysia, work in Malaysia, and we have green jobs available in the country.
Are we thinking big? Are we thinking big when it comes to the environment?
Yeah,
We're big and fly. We want to have flying cars in the past.
So
Thank
we
you.
are
That was
thinking
good.
big. I have to say that we were really serious for restarting with Green Deal. So the ministry is going to submit our proposal to the Economic Council soon on this.
All right. Well, Dr. Zaini, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.